morning, good afternoon, and good night. My name is Mark Fox Jr. This is Become the Podcast. How do you become anything you dream, you declare, you commit, and success is your next breath. So, wanted to do a podcast to kind of celebrate LeBron's success in light of a very, very crazy year. A lot of different acquisitions, a lot of trades, a lot of different movement, a lot of storylines. I don't remember a championship team or a team with championship aspirations having this many storylines or this many narratives in one season. So many big names went in and out of the lineup, from Dwayne Wade, Isaiah Thomas, being a part of the team and not being a part of the team. Then you have these acquisitions: Rodney Hood, Larry Nance Jr., Jordan Clarkson, George Hill. You bring these guys in, and these guys are rotation players. They were rotation players for teams that weren't going to the playoffs, even though George Hill has had some playoff success with the Pacers and the Spurs. He was playing basically, he wasn't even, he was playing meaningless minutes in Sacramento, and they bring all these guys over to the Cavs, and you're thinking there's no way possible this is really going to work. Maybe for a few games it was working because no one knew what to think of all these different acquisitions. But then we start to realize that the defense isn't very good. A lot of these guys were rotation players for a reason. George Hill starts to break down like he always does every year. And LeBron's playing an incredible amount of minutes. Can he sustain playing? I think he led the league in minutes this year in his 15th year. Can he sustain this level of play? Then there's minutes where there was moments when he seemed disconnected. Then all of a sudden, Kevin Love starts getting injured. That Tristan Thompson has some off-the-court issues that could possibly impact his play. Kyle Korver gets injured. J.R. Smith had a bad year relative to other bad years. And then they go into the playoffs. They go into the playoffs, I think, as a fourth seed. I think they go in as a fourth seed. And they're struggling against the Pacer team, against the Pacers. And the Pacers taking the game 7. And so just all these narratives. And you're wondering, how are these guys? Are these guys going to figure it out? Are they going to come together? Are they going to develop enough team chemistry, camaraderie to advance in the playoffs? And they get through the first round. LeBron seems to be going up a level, right? He seems to be going up a level. He's controlling the game in a different way. He's figuring out ways to stay on the court, be effective, pick his spots. I mean, he's just playing on a much higher level and really taking a team that many would say is as bad as some of his earlier teams that he's taken to the playoffs in advance. The Boobie Gibson, Larry Hughes, Damon Jones type teams. He's taking a team like that in 2018 or 2017, 2018 season. He's taking a team like that and advancing to the playoffs and playing at this incredible level. And then they run into, but then they get past the Indiana and the Pacers in the game 7, where LeBron again just makes incredible shots, makes incredible plays, controls the entire game, makes these guys better, especially when some of the key players aren't playing well. He finds a way to put them on his back and do what most people say, where one man can't do it, but he is the one man that is doing it. And then they run into the Toronto Raptors, and I'm talking to one of my basketball players, and we're joking. I said LeBron got into Toronto's head the second that they got past the first round, and we half joking, half serious, but you say it, and you kind of hoping that it's somewhat of a joke. You're hoping that the Toronto Raptors would be competitive. And for me personally, I wanted to see Toronto do well because I'm a Mike Jordan fan. When you talk about the who's better, Mike or LeBron, I always side with Mike. 6 for 6, no Game 7. What LeBron has been able to do in 15 years. Mike was able to do in a very short amount of time. I think Mike was in the league for 15 years. The last 2 years he was in Washington, but what Mike did in his 13-year career, LeBron is still trying to do that in his 15-year career, and we know that LeBron's going to play probably a few more years. And then there's also this narrative of what if he played long enough to play with his son, right? So LeBron's going to surpass Mike in points. Mike's going to surpass Mike in every major statistical category. But at the end of the day, when you look at what Mike was able to do in a short amount of time, it's still very hard for me to. And when we look at what Mike was able to do every time he got to the pinnacle or the finals, he won every single time. He never ever lost, and he never gave the opposition a Game 7. Some people say, "Oh well, LeBron's numbers are incredible. Look at what he's doing in Game 7s. Look at what he's doing in the playoffs." You're going to put up more numbers the more opportunities you have. You have more opportunity to do better things or more things or accumulate more numbers and stats the more opportunities you have, right? Mike was able to do a lot of that in a small amount of time. But we want to celebrate LeBron. But as you can see, I'm a Mike fan, okay, through and through. And so as I start looking at what LeBron so as I look at what LeBron is doing, I kind of wanted him to, I wanted Toronto to get after him so that the comparisons would stop, so that the narrative that he could possibly be the GOAT would stop, so that they would even stop saying, well, look at how many times he's been to the finals versus Mike and all of that other stuff. Like, no, let's be done with it, because he ran into a Toronto Raptors team that basically cut it off, that stopped this consecutive finals run, and I want that to be a part of LeBron's narrative so that we wouldn't have to discuss if he or Mike were in the same class anymore. I wanted enough slip ups, stumbles, whatever, fumbles. I wanted that to be a part of the narrative so that we wouldn't have to even entertain the idea that LeBron was in Michael's class. Yeah, we can talk about numbers all we want, but when we talk about the narrative, when we talk about the legacy, when we talk about how much of a killer Mike was versus LeBron, we talk about storylines, right? Dominance and all of that stuff. We wouldn't have to talk about it anymore because Mike's narrative would just overpower and overwhelm LeBron's narrative. But it didn't happen. It did not happen. LeBron came through. He destroyed the Toronto Raptors. And so now the next team that he will face will be either the Boston Celtics or the 76ers. And I think LeBron's got something for both of those teams, right? If the Boston Celtics have owned the 76ers, even though the series is now 3-1, if the Celtics have owned the 76ers, right? And we all know that LeBron has owned, let me say it again. If we know that the Celtics have owned the 76ers in this series, and we know that LeBron has owned the Celtics, you can see that LeBron might be on his way back to the finals. Right now, will he win? I doubt it. Now, going against Houston and going against Golden State, which that's what I think that's what I think the finals would be. He's going against a juggernaut. But this is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to reveal LeBron's secret weapon, right? His secret weapon. A lot of people think his secret weapon is the millions of dollars that he invests in himself in terms of maintaining his body and keeping himself healthy. LeBron figured out what Mike figured out going into his 6th year of his career. Mike has figured out what Tom Brady has figured out. Mike has figured out what Phil Knight, owner of Nike, has figured out. He figured out what the greats have figured out. He's figured out what Floyd Mayweather has figured out. He's figured out the secret to success. So you talk about anybody who's super successful. You talk about anybody who's been able to not only be successful, but to have a long-standing legacy of success. So he's figured out that the secret to success is the idea that the highest form of competition is the competition with self. The highest form of competition is the competition with self. Mike knew this early on. Tom Brady knows this now. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other players who kind of figured this out. But it's the highest form of competition, the competition with self. Early in LeBron's career, he probably heard stories about Mike being uber competitive. He was playing with, or at the same time that Kobe was playing. So you hear stories about Kobe being uber competitive. And when you hear about these stories and you hear how competitive these guys are, you start to think that they're competing with the opposition. You start to think that, okay, this guy is competitive. He's competing against everyone else that he plays. He's, because when that person is competing, that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, those guys are going after the person that's in front of them. And so you think that the highest form of competition is literally the champion from last year, or the MVP, or the team with the best record. That's the highest form of competition, or the highest form of competition is the best team in the finals, or the Western Conference Finals, or the team that I got to get through to get to the next level. That's the highest form of competition, and this team playing at their best, being injury-free, that's the highest form of competition. No, it is not the highest form of competition. It's the highest form of competition, the competition with self. See, Mike understood this going into his 6th year. See, before his 6th year, I'll take that back. His 6th year, he won a championship. So that was in the 90-91 season. I think Phil Jackson got there, I think in 89-90 season. And I think the 88 season was the last season that Doug Collins was there. And so when you hear interviews about the difference between Doug Collins and Phil Jackson, Phil Jackson is known as the Zen Master. And he's known as this guy who's deep into meditation and mindfulness and attacking the game from a spiritual place, right? Well, Doug Collins is an incredible basketball mind, but when you would watch him, he was a lot more emotional, a lot more erratic in his behavior, and even throughout the years, if you are a basketball fan, you know that Doug Collins wears his heart on his sleeve. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. And I think there's this desperate desire to win and to compete that allowed Doug to not only be a good coach, a very good coach throughout his entire career, but a very good player as well. But you could also see that that's kind of how the entire team attacked success. And so Mike was hell-bent on winning, but he was doing it through this idea that I want to compete against the best. So I want to compete against the Detroit Pistons. I want to compete against whoever's in front of me. And it was a literal, that concept, that notion, that idea was literal. I want to beat the Pistons. I want to beat the Pistons. I want to beat Isaiah Thomas. I want to beat Lambeer. I want to destroy Lambeer. Those guys were being so physical with Mike that he wanted to beat those guys. right? He wanted to beat those guys. He wanted to dominate Lambert, Sally, Mahorn, all of those guys who are, jumping in the air with elbows flying, with arm bars. He wanted to beat those guys. He wanted to defeat those guys. He wanted to defeat Isaiah Thomas. He wanted to take that smile and smirk off his face. He wanted to go after those guys. And when he had a coach, he probably wanted to do the same thing. After Doug Collins left, they got Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson, it took him a couple years, but he eventually got through Mike. And he says, your goal is not to beat the Detroit Pistons. Your goal is not to beat Isaiah Thomas and the game. Your goal is to be the best basketball player you can be. And we have a process. We have a system. And the system is going to free you up. It's going to put you in position. It's going to put everybody else in position. So our goal as a team is to master the system. So the highest form of competition is the competition with self. So no longer are we working to beat the Detroit Pistons. We're working to master our system. So give the basketball up and cut. Once the ball moves, you rotate this way. Defensively, we want to do these things, but offensively, when we throw the ball to the corner, we want this cut, we want this screen. When we throw the ball up to the top of the key, we want this cut, we want this screen, we want this movement, we want these ideas. We're not going to worry about the score, right? We're not going to worry about what the defense is doing. We're going to worry about us. We're going to master us. And so through that process, Mike learned how to master himself. I have to master my emotions. I have to master my physical condition. I have to master my strength. I have to master my shot making ability. I have to master spots on the floor. Since I know what the offense is, right? I know I'm going to catch the basketball. I know I need to master the post game. I need to master the pinch post. I need to master certain driving lanes. I have to master. Then I got to be able to stop on a dime and take away and shoot the jump shot when I know that the defender is taking away my drive. There's certain aspects of this offense that I have to master. So I'm going to focus on mastering my ability to master the offense, my ability to master my shot making ability. I want to be able to get to my spots and master certain spots on the floor. I'm going to focus on that and not focus on the Detroit Pistons. So how do you go into a game looking to beat the opponent without focusing on the opponent? Well, simply by way of mastering your skill, mastering yourself, you're going to give yourself a chance to beat your opponent, especially if your opponent is looking to compete against you. So before, I think that the Pistons, they didn't care about they definitely wanted to bully Mike and break his spirit, and they did so. They didn't break Mike's spirit, but in going after Mike, they were able to break everyone else's spirit. And so now when Mike kind of figured out the highest form of competition, the competition with self, and he started to attack the process of mastery and mastering these spots and mastering the triangle offense, the Pistons weren't thinking about that. They still wanted to beat Mike. Now, when Mike wanted to beat them, it was even because they had a better team. So they could get away with it. They could get away with going after Mike and still succeeding because Mike wanted to beat them, but Mike didn't have the team necessary to defeat them. But that next year, when they went into the 90-91 season, they still wanted to beat Mike, but Mike could care less about beating the Pistons. He now wanted to showcase to the world that he was as good as he thought he was. So he was then just competing with himself. That was the challenge. And we saw that he was able to dismantle them. I don't know, I forget if they swept them or if they won one game, but he definitely dismantled the Pistons. He basically broke them up. Now, were they getting old? Yeah, but he destroyed them. Then he went on to beat the Lakers that year. And it became a Mike versus Magic competition. And if you remember that first game, the Chicago Bulls lost because Mike got caught up in the I gotta beat Magic conversation. And then I think it was in game 2, there's a conversation between Mike and Phil Jackson. And it might not be game 2, but I think it was game 2. and they're going back and forth. And Mike said, and Phil saying, did you see that John Paxson was open? And Mike doesn't answer him. Then he asks him again, did you see that John Paxson was open? And finally Mike says yes. And it was this moment when Mike was breaking away from everything that had got them to the finals, because he started to take the opportunity to compete personally. He wanted to beat the Magic. He wanted to beat Magic. He wanted to beat the Lakers versus staying in his lane and continuing to beat yesterday's version of himself. He wanted to beat he wanted to beat the last possession. He wanted to beat the last quarter. He had been working on beating the last quarter or the last shot or the last version of himself. That's what got him to the finals. Looking at what was he before and seeing if he could outdo that version of himself. Whether it was the play, the next play, whether it was the next shot, the next half, the next quarter, so on and so forth. And finally, Mike went back to trusting the process and realized that even within the process of giving up the ball from time to time, I can still have incredible numbers. I can have incredible games. I can still go off for 30 or 40 points or 50 points and do something magical if I just trust the process, allow the game to come to me. And I think from that point forward, he stopped competing with the opposition. He only wanted to master his game. That's what LeBron figured out. LeBron, when he first came into the league, was trying to mimic what he thought people like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant were doing. He thought that I have to compete against the best, and I have to beat the best teams and the best players on the Eastern Conference in order to be great, or I have to beat the best players in order to be great. So I gotta beat Paul Pierce. I have to beat Paul Pierce. Who else was in the East Coast during this time? I gotta beat Gilbert Arenas. He's just naming names. These are people that I have to beat. And because none of those guys understood the secret either, it was all about, well, who's gonna have the best team, or who's gonna play with the most force. Who's got the best athletes, who's got the best, stuff on paper. But once LeBron got to Miami, I think he learned some things about winning. He learned some things about winning from Dwayne Wade, right? They took an L to the Dallas Mavericks, and then the next year, they beat OKC, and then I can't remember who they got their second championship against. And then they beat the Spurs, and I think they definitely learned some things about winning, right? I don't think LeBron knew the secret just yet. I think they were just super, super talented. LeBron was at his apex. Dwayne Wade was still at his peak. Bosh was at his peak. And they were just able to overwhelm the opposition. They had guys like Ray Allen who kind of saved them and gave them an opportunity to keep playing and not have their thing blown up. And then LeBron went back home. He went back home, and then they played against the Warriors, and they lost. And I think that's when it started to happen for him. I think he realized, I'm not going to beat this team. Love's out. Kyrie's hurt. I'm not going to beat this team. There's no way possible. I can work really hard. I'm not going to beat this team. So let me just go out every game and put together a great game. Let me just put together a great game. Let me D up. Let me assist. Let me score when I have opportunities to. Let me just put together a solid performance, a great game, right? And I think they took him to 6 games. I think they took him to 6 games. I think they might have got 2 games. I think LeBron might have got 2 games and took him to 6. The next season, they got a healthier team. They go to the playoffs. Eventually, they win. But I think it was what LeBron learned the previous year, that it's not necessarily about me beating them. I just have to worry about being great. I just got to worry about mastering certain spots on the floor, mastering the process. And he understands that it's not about necessarily defeating Green, right? But it's about mastering the process. So he plays a little mind trick with Green. Green goes for it, kicks him, and all of a sudden you start seeing LeBron playing these games, and he started manipulating the game a little bit, right? He started to manipulate the game a little bit, and he gets Green to go after him, and Green, not understanding the secret, is now all he wants to do is beat LeBron. Well, LeBron is not necessarily concerned about beating Green. He's concerned about mastering the process of winning, mastering his craft, mastering himself. All he's concerned with is competing on the highest level. So he wants to beat last year's version of himself. So he's looking at, what did I do last year? How can I be better than that person? If that person was able to take this team to 6 games, how can I be the person that takes this team to 7 and put my team in position to win? And some people will say, okay, well, Kyrie saved him. Okay, Kyrie saved him. But he put that team in position to have Kyrie make that big time shot because he was trusting the process. It wasn't about LeBron beating the Golden State Warriors. It was about LeBron beating last year's version of himself and then letting everything fall in place. And that's what happened. Everything fell in place. They start off kind of rocky. They come back. Green gets suspended for a game. They get another game. Green comes back. I think Green came back in game 7. And by then they had the momentum. At that point, now the Warriors were working to beat LeBron. But LeBron was not trying to beat the Warriors. He just wanted to beat last year's version of himself. And that's exactly what he did. He took him to a game 7. He trusted the process. And he was able to let Kyrie do his thing and get a win. We go to the next year. And all of a sudden, we start to see this trend where LeBron in his 13th and 14th year, when we think he's going on decline, just looking at Father Time, we start seeing LeBron's play elevate. It's because he's no longer competing with the opposition. You look at this Toronto series. Toronto wanted to beat LeBron. They dedicated their entire season to beating LeBron. If you look at the storylines, the narratives throughout the course of the year, there's plenty of sound bites about those guys having the versatility, the length, the athleticism, the bodies to throw at LeBron. And maybe that's the commentators speaking for them. Maybe they didn't think that way. But just from looking at basketball, just looking at the season, all 82 games, and looking at narratives and listening to podcasts and things like that, looking at games and whatnot, we know that a lot of teams, all depending on who's been kicking their butt for the last few years or standing in the way of their success, they'll build a team with the intent of this game that we think we're going to play in the Eastern Conference Finals or the Western Conference Finals, right? How many teams built themselves to beat Mike? You remember back in the day when the New York Knicks got Gerald Wilkins because they felt like they needed an athlete to beat Mike. So you go get a guy like Gerald Wilkins, 6'4", 6'5" athlete, because you're hoping that when you run into Mike, you got somebody for him. Mike was never concerned about Gerald Wilkins. Never concerned about Gerald Wilkins. He wasn't concerned about Clyde Drexler. He wasn't concerned about any 2-guard you could throw at him. Even when Gary Payton, they talk about Gary Payton is the guy who slowed Mike down in the playoffs in the finals. Mike averaged, I think, 28 points. But Mike was never concerned about Gary Payton. He was never, ever concerned about Gary Payton. Yeah, you have to acknowledge him, you have to respect him, but he wasn't concerned about Gary Payton. But we know Gary Payton was concerned about Mike. We know that Gary Payton was concerned about Mike. And no matter what he says, he was thinking about Mike more than Mike was thinking about Gary Payton. Mike was not looking up stats and looking up film on how Gary Payton defends defenders. All he knew is, if I get to my spots, you're in trouble. Done. If I catch the basketball on the block, you're in trouble. Done. I'm 6'4", I'm 6'6", you're 6'4". I jump higher than you. There's nothing you can do once I elevate. Same thing with LeBron. LeBron is not worried about any of these wings, these 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" athletic wings. He's not worried about anybody. He's not worried about DeRozan or Lowry. He's not worried about any of those guys. But they were all worried about him. And that's the difference. That's LeBron's secret. That's why he's playing at such a high level. He's taken all of the power away from the opposition. He's taken all of the power away from the opposition. He's reclaimed that power. He's claimed that power. He's basically saying, you're not going to be the reason I fail or succeed. You're not going to be the reason I fail or succeed. I'm going to be the reason I fail or succeed. So every game he's going out thinking, I want to have access to all of my years of training and being coached. I want to get access to all of that, and I want to gain access to it so that I can call upon it whenever I need to. I can use it whenever I need to. And then he wants to exercise incredible discipline. So no matter what you're doing, no matter what scheme you throw at me, no matter if it's a double team or if it's single coverage, no matter what it is, I'm going to do what I have been taught to do to succeed based upon the situation and the read. That's all I care about. I don't care about who you throw at me. I don't care if they're Van Vliet. I don't care if they're DeRozan. I don't care if they're Ibaka. It doesn't matter who you throw at me. I'm going to do what I've been taught to do to win. I always talk about this when I talk to other players. I was asked the question, are you practicing bulletproof moves? Are you practicing a move that works against, a high percentage of the competition? It works against 97, 98, 99, 100% of the competition? Or are you working against moves that only work against 50 to 60% of the competition, right? If you're working on moves that work against a large percentage of the field, then why would you compromise that move when you see a different body or a different body type? Like if I'm working on a move and I've been told that this move will work against 98% of the field, then why would I change that move or compromise that move for the opposition? That makes no sense. I'm going to practice that move, master that move with incredible discipline because I know that it gives me a 98% chance of success if I do it right. That's LeBron's mentality now. That's LeBron's mentality. And so now there's no pressure. There's no pressure to beat the opposition, or there's no pressure that comes with the beating with a team that's maybe as energetic and maybe giving you problems, even like the Pacers. There's still no pressure because the pressure is, am I doing what I'm supposed to do to be great? Am I being disciplined? That's where the pressure comes from. So I'm not intimidated by the opposition. I'm not intimidated by the stakes. I'm not intimidated by the numbers. Or let's say LeBron's not intimidated by the numbers. He's not intimidated by the winning percentage or the stakes. He's not intimidated by all those things. You can't intimidate him because he's not focusing on the opposition. He doesn't care. All he cares about is being better than he was last game, last possession, last quarter, last half. That's it. That's all he cares about. That's all he cares about. Why is LeBron so calm? So benign? Because he's in his own head in a good way. He's in his own head. So everybody else is game planning for LeBron. They want to beat LeBron. LeBron's like, you can beat me. You can beat me if you want to. If you're good enough, you can outdo me statistically, but I'm going to win this game. I'm going to win this game by being better than I was last game. Now, if you're competing on the same level, LeBron might run to a buzzsaw. And then it's now who's going to be the most disciplined? Who's mastered their game the best? But 9 times out of 10, if you're going after someone, or if the people are just going after LeBron, they're not going to win. Now, there is a narrative where you run into a team that's just too good. So if he runs into the Golden State Warriors, I mean, you got a 73-9 team with the best player, arguably the best scorer in the league. I was playing 2K yesterday, 2K18, and I went against the Golden State Warriors, and the attributes for Clay, Durant, and Stephen Curry was 2-point shooting A+, 3-point shooting A+. And that's how it is in real life. That's how it is in real life. And in the game, Draymond was doing incredible things. He was getting rebounds. He was getting steals. He was doing incredible things. I was playing against the computer. The computer was them, and that's exactly what they do in real life. Those guys are incredible shooters, incredible scorers. They seem like they make everything, and Draymond seems to become this irritant, this super fast, super physical, super athletic guy who just, he's like a modern day Dennis Rodman. Not quite the rebounder, but a better overall basketball player with the same energy and same antics, the same motor. I wouldn't say the same motor. People that watch Dennis Rodman play may get upset about that. But definitely, when you're going against something that powerful and something that good, then you can master the game all you want. You still need pieces. But what's going to happen, this is going to happen, LeBron's going to go into that. Okay, he's going to go into that series because 9 times out of 10, they're going to get through the Eastern Conference because nobody else in the Eastern Conference is playing this way. All right, maybe the Celtics, but I think once the Celtics get to the Eastern Conference, they're going to be thinking we got to beat LeBron. They're not going to be thinking let's continue to master our process collectively. Let's master our process. They're going to be thinking they got to beat LeBron, and that's why they're going to lose. And LeBron's going to run up against a team that's just too good. Okay, you got to have pieces, right? LeBron's incredible, but you got to have pieces. Just like Mike. Mike was incredible, but he had to have pieces. Scottie had to figure some things out. Horace Grant had to figure some things out. In the second go-around, they got a world-class rebounder in Dennis Rodman. They had Tony Kukoc. And mind you, that team that Mike came to in 95, 96 had already been together for a year. They grew up. They grew up for basically a season and probably 7/4, right? They grew up, and then they added Mike. So now that team was better because they had played without Mike, and then to get a guy like Mike, they all figured it out, and then they were able to go to another level. You wonder what happens if Mike stays. Do those guys develop the same, right? Does Tony Kukoc develop the same? Do they get Dennis Rodman? All right. So you got to have some pieces. Even though you may know the secret to success, you still got to have some pieces. But LeBron's going to have an amazing season. He's going to have an amazing season, and this will be the narrative. LeBron did everything he was supposed to do. The others, as Shaq will call them, didn't come through. Larry Nance Jr. is, he may not be a championship caliber starter type player. Not yet. Larry Nance Jr., no. Jordan Clarkson, no. Rodney Hood, no. I wouldn't be surprised if George Hill got injured at some point or got hurt or something like that. K Love, he's kind of figuring some things out. We'll see if his hand holds up. LeBron could probably take him to 6 games. He's good enough to take him to 6 games to just overpower him, just willpower. You can probably just will a couple wins, just like Dwayne Wade did. Dwayne Wade gets it. He realizes that I can't do it every single night. But he got those guys at least 2. You got 2 throwback games out of Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade gets it. I'm not competing with the other people. I'm competing with myself. Can I get my body in shape to go out here and compete on a high level? And he did for 2 games. And the rest of those guys got to pick up the pieces. That's their job. Those are the young legs, the young horses. But there we go. The highest form of competition, the competition with self. And LeBron figured out the secret to success. It's not competing with everyone else. It's competing with himself, the latest version of himself. And he's done that. And it's brought him immense success. And I think that as long as his body holds up, he will continue to terrorize the NBA because he's not playing to beat anyone else. He's playing to beat himself. And I think when you start playing that game, it really is a higher game of chess. It's a higher game of chess. And I think when you look at the greats, they all know this stuff. I talked about Phil Knight. Phil Knight is not concerned about Adidas. He's not concerned about Reebok or anybody else out there. He's not concerned about any other shoe brand, Under Armour. He's not concerned about any of those people, right? His team not concerned about any of those people. All they're concerned with is creating amazing products that make people feel good, perform good, things of that nature. That's all they care about. But I guarantee you this: these other brands that are out here, they're competing with Nike. They're competing with Nike. That's why Nike is the best. Adidas does some incredible things. Under Armour does some incredible things. There's shoe brands and companies out there that do incredible things. You have your niche like, Brooks and Saucony and New Balance, and those brands, they do a really good job with running and whatnot. And they try to do some lifestyle stuff, but at the end of the day, they're thinking about Nike, but Nike is not thinking about them. Or maybe some of those brands are saying, you know what, you guys can have the rest of the market. We're just going to do running shoes better than everybody else does, running shoes, including Nike. But the idea is, if you really want to be great, you can't worry about the opposition. You have to worry about, what is your process? Now master your process. What's your mission statement? Master your mission statement. What's your genius level talent? What's your highest skill? What do you bring to the table that is unique? Okay, master that. Master that. That's it. Master that. If you master that, then you'll be good. Every single day, be good. Every single day, be better than what you were yesterday. And there's going to be some days when you won't. Some days you just won't be better. Maybe something happened that day that caused you to lose sight of what you were yesterday, and you forgot, and now you come into the next day just not completely there. But if you can exercise clarity and figure it out, who you were yesterday, and be mindful of that, and then come up with a process and master it that will help you to be better than you were yesterday, then you give yourself a chance to do some incredible things. And LeBron has figured that out. So that's it, man. That's it. Hope that makes sense. Not only for what you're watching when you watch LeBron, but hopefully in life, when you start thinking about yourself in life and how can you be better, how can you be a higher version of yourself. Hopefully that understanding of the highest version of the highest competition is the competition with self. Hopefully that makes sense. It resonates with you and gives you an edge over your competitor. So I ended off. Greatness lives on the edge of death. I am not afraid to die. I will fight for my dreams. I will celebrate my dreams, and I will die for my dreams. Thoughts are things, and everything starts off as a thought first and springs from a place of mindfulness and clarity. My name is Marv Brox Jr. The highest form of competition is the competition with self. And I'm done. Take care.